Sunset Overdrive was a $42 million game that was supposed to be Microsoft's next big game franchise. It managed to take an established, stale genre and completely turn it on its head, creating one of the most unique, beautiful, and exciting third-person shooters of the 2010s. It had all of the makings of a successful game, and it was even made in collaboration with Insomniac Games, the developers behind extremely popular franchises such as Spyro, Ratchet & Clank, and Spider-Man. It should have been a massive commercial success on nearly every single level, but after 3+ years of development, solid critical reception, and a considerable amount of praise from fans, the game completely flopped and only generated $567 in profits for Insomniac Games. How did something with so much potential manage to vanish into the shadows of gaming history? Why did Sunset Overdrive fail so dramatically? Well, to tell this story, we need to start with a bit of context about Microsoft and the timeline that led to the creation of this game in the first place. In 2013, fun, action-packed games that didn't take themselves too seriously were topping the charts and generating hundreds of millions of dollars in sales. Games like BioShock Infinite, Saints Row 4, and Borderlands 2 were adored by fans and were flying off the shelves. And Microsoft wanted in on the craze. Through its subsidiary, Microsoft Game Studios, the company had quite a few extremely successful game franchises under their belt, but there was nothing in their catalog that quite scratched the itch of chaotic, lighthearted fun that was found in games like these. And with BioShock Infinite selling over 4 million copies, Borderlands 2 selling 6 million copies, and Saints Row 4 selling 1 million copies in the first week alone, it was clear that the market wanted this style of game more than ever. Microsoft needed a good partner to work on a project like this, and Insomniac Games was the perfect match. Their studio is different from many others because they've always revolved around a passion for creativity, which is something that you can easily see in all of their most successful game franchises. The company grew rapidly throughout the early 2000s through the Spyro trilogy and carved out a space in the bright, cartoonish section of the market. Ratchet & Clank helped to put Insomniac on the map even further, with 15 titles released by 2013. Nearly every single release saw rave reviews and steady sales, and lighthearted humor was a huge part of the fluid worlds and stories in these games. The fighting and advancement systems kept players glued to their screens, and the series built Insomniac's reputation as a powerhouse of consistency. It proved that they could carry on easily through technical advancements and push the limits of what they could achieve with their games. And Microsoft thought that a partnership with Insomniac would be their golden ticket to create a game that could become their next big IP. Microsoft decided to go all in and bet on Insomniac's future, allowing their creativity to run wild with the hopes that they could create a successful IP like Ratchet & Clank. With a pre-approved advance of over $42 million, Microsoft funded Insomniac Games to develop a new title for their upcoming console, the Xbox One. Now, Insomniac just needed to decide what this game would be about. The idea of Sunset Overdrive was born from Marcus Smith and Drew Murray, two Insomniac Games designers who were bored of the dreary visuals of the apocalypse genre. They found inspiration in the mundane, ridiculous aspects of end-of-the-world stories and came up with a game concept that focused on fun in the end times. This fun would take place in a colorful world in which human error was covered up by a giant corporation. A contaminated energy drink unleashed chaos around the city and created a bunch of monsters that the player would have to fight. The city itself was built around the desire to rampage in a vibrant apocalypse and brought a similar feeling to the chaos and charm found in early Ratchet & Clank games. And the hardware capabilities of the new Xbox One would allow for this world to really push the limits of what's possible in a modern AAA game. It sounded like the perfect project, and work began on Sunset Overdrive in 2011. Their strategy in coming up with this unique idea is what really helped Sunset Overdrive to succeed. I love a good strategy, especially if it involves fast-paced thinking and real-time battles, like the sponsor of today's video, Castle Duels. Castle Duels is my favorite new mobile game of 2024, and if you like deck-building battle games, this is a great way to pass the time. In this game, you build a deck by collecting and upgrading a variety of different units that you then have to strategize with in order to win insane battles against other players. Right now in the game, I have an Archer, Poison Frog, Pirate, Vampire, and Crusher, and I have to merge these units together on the battlefield to create the strongest possible combination of characters to beat the enemy. It's definitely exciting, and with a huge selection of characters, many of which I haven't even unlocked yet, all with different abilities, every battle feels different, and this game keeps pulling me back in. There are also clans and tournaments in this game to increase your challenge even further, and you can climb the global leaderboard if you want a larger challenge. In short, Castle Duels is a great game, and you can play it today by using my link in the description and pinned comment, or by scanning the QR code on the screen now. Thanks again to Castle Duels for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to our story about Sunset Overdrive. And at E3 of 2013, the game was announced with a teaser that dove into the absurd, hilarious, action-filled fun. It showed off ugly, cartoon mutants that a group of mismatched characters made quick work to destroy. Right from the start, it leans into the chaos and refuses to take itself too seriously, and fans seem to love it. There was a lot of excitement in the air because of Insomniac's track record for creating amazing games and the new release of the Xbox One. And this hype grew even further when Microsoft announced that the game would launch with a limited edition Sunset Overdrive Xbox One bundle for $400. Limited edition Xbox bundles were only reserved for some of the biggest and best games, so the fact that one was planned for Sunset Overdrive helps to show how big Microsoft expected this game to be. The official Sunset Overdrive trailer was released the following year at E3 2014. This trailer dove a bit more into the game and introduced fans to the story behind Sunset Overdrive. The city has been overrun with mutants created by the energy drink Charge. Your goal was to clear the city of these mutants by navigating around the colorful world through parkour, zip lines, and grind rails, and the combination of combat and acrobatics helped to turn this experience into something extremely unique and extremely exciting. People seem to love the fact that Insomniac Games had thrown itself back into the action and color, and the playstyle of parkour combined with fast-paced fighting was relatively unique to Sunset Overdrive at the time. The game stood out amidst the apocalyptic genre taking over at the time, and even Borderlands felt gray and dull in comparison. It seemed like a lot of fun, but some were still a bit skeptical. See, Insomniac had lost people's interest with their recently underwhelming titles. The Resistance series had fizzled out with lackluster sales despite its solid rankings on Metacritic in the 80s for each game, and their other big title, Fuse, had been rejected loudly with a 62 on Metacritic and a 5.7 user score. Insomniac really needed something that would captivate their players, and based on the reception to the early trailers for Sunset Overdrive, they may have struck gold. Microsoft provided the funding and the tech of the Xbox One. The team was passionate about the idea. It sounded great, they just needed to make sure that people maintained their excitement for the game up until launch. But well, that was going to be harder than the team at Microsoft initially thought it would be. Because, see, it was 2014 and there were some big things going on in the industry at the time that would push the excitement for Sunset Overdrive into the background. Call of Duty Advanced Warfare was shaking up the tiresome Call of Duty formula, Destiny had just launched, and most importantly, Grand Theft Auto 5 was finally releasing on PS4 and Xbox One. Even though Sunset Overdrive was supposed to be one of Microsoft's newest flagship franchises that would help to drive console sales, it was competing with some of the biggest games of the decade. Would Microsoft be able to market this game well enough to compete with these other titles, or was it doomed from the start? Sunset Overdrive finally released on October 27, 2014, and it cost $59.99. The absurd game was a breath of fresh air, and a sip of a contaminated energy drink amidst the dark, moody, and repetitive games that were being released around this time. To fans of the game, Insomniac nailed it the way that they often do when they get to build something without restriction. The passion behind the work came through so well that Forbes called Sunset Overdrive a game that developers actually loved. It even held its place as the number 5 spot on Time's list of the best 10 Xbox One X games you can play right now for over 6 years. With an 81 on Metacritic and a 7.9 user score, it delivered on what it had promised. But, well, the positive sentiment and passion for this game didn't quite carry over to sales. Sure, the game did ship with an Xbox One bundle, but otherwise, people really weren't buying it. In fact, I bought the Xbox One bundle when it came out that had Sunset Overdrive in it, and I never even played it at the time. And that seems to be the case with a lot of people, so if that was you, let me know in the comments. Sunset Overdrive technically topped the charts with 221,920 copies sold the first week after it was released. But November saw the release of Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, which sold 7.5 million units worldwide in its first week. By then, Sunset Overdrive had been knocked down to the 10th spot with under 310,000 copies sold, including the Xbox One bundles. And the next week, it was down to number 40. The market was bursting with witty, violent, and fun games. Record-breaking competition that fans had been patiently awaiting for years all sold millions of copies in their first few months, pushing Sunset Overdrive to the back of people's minds and ensuring that, from the start, it hardly stood a chance. And it wasn't doing much for Insomniac Games either, because, see, Microsoft were the ones who funded the development of this game. They paid Insomniac upfront with a massive $42 million advance, and in turn, Insomniac would develop the game, with Microsoft retaining the rights to any Sunset Overdrive sequels, and Insomniac maintaining maintaining the rights to the IP, but getting 0% royalties in the process. Basically, Microsoft paid Insomniac to make the game, and Insomniac needed to remain below the amount that Microsoft paid them for the game to be a profitable venture. If it sold well and Microsoft liked the reception and performance, Insomniac would be able to profit in the long term through a continuous partnership with Microsoft and additional sequels being released. They basically took a gamble that the game would be good enough to build a long-term relationship with Microsoft and to turn Sunset Overdrive into something similar to the Gears of War series. But with sales being so low, things would go downhill pretty quickly. For now though, Insomniac wanted to keep their word, and even with the lower than expected sales, the team continued their original plans to support the game with regular updates and DLC. The Sunset Overdrive Weapons Pack came out on November 25th, 2014 and cost $4.99 for 4 additional weapons. The Mystery of Moyle Rig was the first add-on that included missions and carried on the story, released on December 23rd in 2014. It unlocked a previously hidden zone on the map, and while it did seem ambitious, people weren't that impressed with it, and it received a lower review than the game itself at a 65 on Metacritic with a user score of 7.1. Dawn of the Rise of the Machines followed for $9.99, but it only received a 6.4 from users on Metacritic and was also considered to be an underwhelming DLC at best, doing nothing for the baseline sales of this game. And by January of 2015, Sunset Overdrive had sold less than 1 million copies. Sales were so bad in fact that on the day of the final DLC's release, just 5 months after launch, Microsoft permanently dropped the price of the main game by over 30% to $39.99. Insomniac had thrown their all into this title with trust from a fresh studio relationship with Microsoft, and just 6 months after launch, it failed to garner the reaction that they had expected. The sales were extremely low. Sunset Overdrive had still only sold 1.8 million copies and made a grand total of $49,737,133 by the end of 2023. An infamous leak that was later confirmed by Insomniac Games themselves revealed that it had cost them $42,682,135 to produce. So there was only about $7 million left after the game had broken even, and Insomniac had no royalties whatsoever, meaning that Microsoft would get all of the profit from the game's sales. With Insomniac staying true to their word and releasing new DLCs, even though the game really wasn't large enough to support the development of these DLCs, in the end, the company ended up profiting a total of $567. Yes, these are confirmed real numbers. Sunset Overdrive made $567 for Insomniac Games. But surprisingly, this still isn't the end of this story. See, while Sunset Overdrive was a commercial flop, it has aged really well, and the game today has a cult-like following with over 90% positive reviews on Steam. But see this is a problem. With Microsoft funding the development of Sunset Overdrive and having the exclusive rights to release any sequels for the game, Insomniac would need to re-partner with Microsoft in order to make a Sunset Overdrive 2, something that fans these days really want. But, well, Insomniac Games was acquired by PlayStation in 2019. So, Sony owns Insomniac Games and would probably love to release a sequel to Sunset Overdrive for PlayStation consoles because they own the IP. But with Microsoft owning publishing rights, they can't actually release this game for PlayStation unless Microsoft agrees to it. So any hopes for a Sunset Overdrive remake or sequel are up in the air, and it's ultimately up to Microsoft and Sony, two brutal competitors, to come to an agreement for this to be possible. And I just have a hunch that this probably isn't going to happen. But one thing is undeniable. Sunset Overdrive was a complete failure, and this story is one of the more interesting ones that I've covered on this channel. Did you ever play Sunset Overdrive? What did you like about it? If you haven't played it, do you know anyone who has? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and consider liking this video and subscribing for more deep dives like this. You can find all of the sources for this video in the description as always. I will see you guys next time, and peace.